Vážení diváci, jmenuji se Zuzka Ambrosková a jménem Skalického institutu vás všechny moc vítám na dnešní debaty o Doughnut Economy, Doughnut Cities a cirkulární ekonomice. Dovolte mi na začátek jen pár úvodních a organizačních slov. Tato akce je součástí evropského projektu Ideas Yard, Talking About Europe, a jde o společnou iniciativu Goethe institutu a řady dalších nejen kulturních institucí. Tuto debatu jsme připravili s velvyslanectvím Nizozemského království v Praze, kterému tímto moc děkujeme za skvělou spolupráci a podporu. Celá série Ideas Yard je podpořena EUNIC Global, European Union National Institutes for Culture, což je evropská síť národních kulturních institutů. Cílem projektu, tak jako cílem této debaty, je otevírání témat, která jsou aktuální napříč Evropou a také vzájemná inspirace a sdílení zkušeností. Po tomto mém úvodním slově bude debata pokračovat už jen v angličtině. Tady v Zoomu je ale možnost simultánního tlumočení do češtiny. Pokud tedy debatu sledujete na Facebooku, připojte se k nám do Zoomu a využijte tuto možnost. Překlad do českého jazyka si nastavíte tak, že kliknete dole na liště v Zoomu na tlačítko zeměkoule, Language Interpretation, a tam si zvolíte jazyk Czech. Nebo pokud jste na mobilu nebo na tabletu, tak tuhle možnost najdete v 3 tečky more další. Na konci debaty bude možné klást vlastní otázky. Ráda bych vás vyzvala už teď, pokud máte nějaké dotazy, pokud vás bude cokoliv zajímat, pište otázky do komentářů na Facebooku nebo tady do chatu v Zoomu. Je úplně jedno, jestli v angličtině nebo češtině. Samozřejmě bude také možné zeptat se přímo hostů. Jinak vás ale poprosím, abyste měli vypnuté mikrofony, abychom se vzájemně nerušili. Nyní už předám slovo moderátorovi Pavlu Zedníčkovi z Institutu cirkulární ekonomiky, který nás dnešní debatou provede. Přeji krásný večer a moc děkuji všem za účast.
All right, so good evening everyone, and thank you Susanna for giving me the word, and thank you also for the organizers to having the opportunity today to discuss with our wonderful panelists the concept of circular economy and of doughnut economy in general. My name is Pavel and I'm Czech, and I'm working at this point at the Institute for Circular Economy, where we actually work with this concept, of course. Today, we're going to really speak about the concept of circular economy. How can it help us within cities in tackling some of our global challenges, such as climate change, waste production, and some social instability. We have perfect panelists here, and the role of me as a moderator will be to speak as least as possible and to exploit our wonderful panelists at this opportunity. We have Electra here from Circular Economy with Greek roots, and Electra is a senior strategist at Circular Economy, and she also has quite an experience with the concept of doughnut economy, so I'm really looking forward to hearing a bit more about it and also to introduce it to our audience. We have Wojciech here from the city of Prague. Wojta is actually a past employee of Institute for Circular Economy as well. He's currently working at Circular Economy as well, and he's also the chairman of the steering group at the city of Prague. So we really have a great opportunity to see what's going on in the city of Prague when it comes to implementing some of our circular economy aspects in practice. And then we have Dina, which is a founder and chairwoman of Circular Berlin, which is a non-profit organization, of course, again, working with this concept in general. Just to maybe frame it a little bit, the debate, we're going to work with circular economy, which is actually a concept that is going to help us to explain a bit more how can we actually shape our current way of economy in general. So the way we produce goods, the way we sell goods, the way we work with them. At this point, we're working with the so-called take, make, waste model. So we take something off the ground, we make some stuff out of it, we use it, and then more than often we actually waste it. So these products are actually being wasted and we don't use them anymore. More often, we're also going to focus a bit more on cities. And the reason for that is that at first, we are quite concentrated within cities. Secondly, there's a large, let's say, production of emissions within cities and of waste. And we have the opportunity to change cities and use it as a lever for more sustainable future. The debate is going to be structured basically in 4, let's say, thematic circles. We're going to focus on cities and waste and materials. That's the first part. Then we're going to focus on the concept of, or how can actually circular economy help us within mitigating climate change, which is a key topic of concern. And then we're going to focus a bit more about the social side, which is also something that is really included in the donut economy concept. Anyway, without further ado, we'll start with a bit of introduction from our panelists with a short presentation so that we have some anchor, and then we'll kick off with the debate. So maybe if I could ask Electra to just give us a short brief and we can start the debate. Electra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pavel. Can you hear me well? Yeah? I'm going to share my screen and just say a few words, as you said, of who I am and where I come from. So indeed, I'm Electra and I do have Greek origins, and currently I'm talking to you from Athens, my home city, but I have been based in Amsterdam and working for an organization, a Dutch organization called Circle Economy. Circle Economy is a non-for-profit organization of about 55 people working with cities, businesses, and nations, helping them to implement a circular economy on the ground. We really work with practical projects and try to make them scalable, so that the concept of circular economy can be realized in practice. I work for the last years with cities. This is my realm, and at Circle Economy, we have developed what we call an innovation journey, a circular innovation journey for cities, where we help the different cities around the world to build roadmaps and pathways on how to realize powerful circular economy projects so that they can close what we call the circularity gap. And our principles and our philosophy of working is really rooted in the co-creation, participation, and collaboration of all the necessary stakeholders, the urban change makers, which can be experts, leaders, entrepreneurs, or policymakers, to enable them to imagine alternative futures and design practical and circular and scalable circular innovations. What we call these journeys at Circle Economy is the Circle City Scan, which is a journey of about 1 to 1.5 years, where we take a city through 4 different stages, 4 phases, to create a pathway for them. And we start with a socioeconomic analysis, understanding the current state of the city in different social and environmental and economic indicators. Then diving deeper into the urban metabolism of the city, really understanding the resources that flow in and out of the city in order to have an overview of where we have the biggest losses. And thereafter, we go into designing strategies that they can close the loop of resources and they can end into practical action plans where the stakeholders have clear actions to realize after the end of the journey. As Pavel said, I've been actually personally involved very much in leading the circular Prague project, the Circle City Scan of Prague, together with Wojtek, who's here in the call. It was in 2018 that we started, and working with different stakeholders of the city and different sectors, like the construction sector, households, and utilities. We landed into 3 main strategies, and that have to do with the tendering criteria, with the reuse hub and the waste to biomass power plant, which actually all this kicked off the actual circular journey of the city of Prague, that we now see them growing into different spaces and maturing their strategy in the realm of circular economy. But it's been also in the last 2 years that we at Circular Economy have started to work with a new framework that brings a more holistic view into the conversation of circularity, because it really combines the social and environmental themes under one umbrella. So what are the social aspects of a new economy? How can we make it distributive and fair? How can we make it accessible for everyone? And that's the Doughnut Model. As you can see, this is because of its shape. It's an economic model developed by Kate Raworth, a British economist. And it's beautiful because it is ingeniously simple. As you see, the model has combines 2 circles, and the inner circle is what is called the social foundation. Whatever is within this combines the basic essentials of living, what everyone needs to have a decent life. And that spans from clean water and food to energy, housing, education, and equity or peace and justice. According to the model, whoever falls within the inner circle means that doesn't have enough to meet their basic needs. So we would want to have everyone to meet at least this inner circle and above. Now, yes, we want to make sure that everyone has enough of all these basic needs and as much more as possible. Yet there is another circle, what is called the ecological ceiling, that represents the Earth's carrying capacity. That's representing these 9 planetary boundaries that have been measured by the academia. And so what is the limit of the Earth, and in order to carry our activities, and when we go over it, we overshoot this boundary, and then the Earth cannot come back to a stability and to a balance of regenerating its resources. So yeah, the social foundation, I forgot to mention, is actually representing the Sustainable Development Goals, and the ecological ceiling is representing the planetary boundaries. So this model simply says that actually, instead of growing our economies endlessly, our goal, humanity's 21st century goal, should be to meet the needs of all within the means of the planet, should be to find this balance, to find this sweet spot between these 2 circles, and create and live within this safe and just space for humanity, when everyone has enough to have a decent life, but at the same time, we don't overshoot the capacity of our only unique planet that is actually our home. So that's the model of the Doughnut that is actually promoting the principles of a regenerative and distributive economy. And taking this model, actually, we started working together with the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, which is the team of Kate Raworth, and the network of C40 cities. That's a network of cities working on climate targets, to develop the Thriving Cities Initiative, which is an initiative that we try to downscale the Doughnut, this theoretical model that I just described, and make it a practical tool for transformation, for cities transformations, and making it a compass for cities to thrive. So we piloted in 3 cities, Amsterdam, Philadelphia, and Portland, and that's already the beginning, with many more cities now getting inspired by this and following different journeys and experimenting with the Doughnut all over the world. This principles of this piloting approach is really rooted into the idea of the holistic thinking and developing a systems view, breaking through the different silos of the cities and bringing together city change makers from different departments and fields to work and understand the different aspects of the problem. We have been using the Doughnut as a tool to plot, for example, existing city targets and understand how much the city is covering the different aspects, the social and environmental aspects, and create a holistic vision. And also as a compass and as a mirror to design holistic strategies that combine both social and environmental benefits for the city and the planet as a whole. This work, for example, in the city of Amsterdam, has landed into their Amsterdam Circular Economy Strategy, which is one of the reports that got a lot of traction in the world from the moment that was published in last April, actually, in the middle of COVID, with a public announcement also of the city that they want to adopt, or they are adopting the Doughnut Model as a new framework to create a circular, regenerative, inclusive city. And they have, as I said, inspired so many others to follow their example. Well, that's just a few glimpses of who I am and my work. Thank you very much, and I look forward to be part of the conversation. Thank you, Pavel. The floor to you back. I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, thank you, Elektra, and thanks for the brief intro to the Amsterdam journey and also to the Prague journey. I'm sure we're gonna go much more into depth and into practical cases. Just to maybe underline to our listeners, this event is primarily for you. So should you have any questions, just don't hesitate to ask them in the chat or wherever it find its way to us. And we're just going to be here to answer anything that you would find fit. Anyway, maybe now to get a bit more info to our Czech audience as well, and to our listeners from the Czech Republic, it would be a great bridge now to give the floors to Vojta, who's actually working quite intensively with at the City Hall in the city of Prague. So maybe Vojta, the floor is yours, and feel free to share your experience with us.
Thanks, Pavel. Great to be here. Great to see all the familiar faces, and greetings to everyone I hadn't had the chance to meet yet. I'll start sharing my screen to tell you a little bit more about our story from Prague. And thanks, Elektra, for making that bridge for me. Pavel, can you just nod if you see it? Yeah, great. So right now, it's actually a funny time because as we speak, the City Assembly is deciding whether to approve Prague's climate plan or not. And the climate plan is very much about circular economy and the result of my and other experts' work that we have been developing for the last year and a half. So it's really interesting times, really busy as well. I'm talking to you actually from Sweden. I'm working with Prague. I'm working with circular economy, and I also co-founded the Institute of Circular Economy. So it's a strange mix of all these things, but today I'm going to wear the hat of the city of Prague, and I'm going to tell you shortly, because there'll be more time for that, the story of what we are doing with circular economy. Briefly, for us, it's about closing the loop. It's about eliminating waste and using waste as a resource, and keeping materials in the loop for as long as possible without a loss of quality. And obviously, this mentality, philosophy, or strategy can be applied to many different aspects or levels of the society. But I think the most exciting challenge is really how do we make it happen in the city? But what we know for sure is that we do not want to end up with the so-called recycling economy, where a lot of people, and I think it's one of the biggest misconceptions in Czech and across the world, is that for them, circular economy, it's still connected about separating waste and recycling. But that would be a huge misunderstanding of the potential of the concept that it has for innovation, for jobs, for the environment. So, but I'm sure there'll be more time to talk about that. For us in Prague, it all started with a circle scan, actually, that Electra, me, my colleagues from Mincien, and a lot of different experts, because the group was growing as we were processing with the scan. That process started with the scan, but then a new election in Prague happened, and the current leadership in Prague started with saying, we want to be carbon neutral by 2050. And in order to do that, the Prague city has started a special committee, a so-called climate committee, which I'm the member of, and also 4 different expert groups that are tackling that challenge from their own expertise. So I'm representing the circular economy bunch, but we also have energy expert group, mobility expert group, and climate change adaptation and mitigation expert group. And of course, some of these topics are overlapping, but this is how we kind of grounded officially and internalized the process of the circular economy after the scan, just to give you some hint of how we are approaching it. And right now, the results of that climate committee is the action plan, climate plan, which is quite a detailed story of how do we reach 45% CO2 reduction by 2030, and that's being debated at the city assembly as we speak. When it comes to circular economy and what we try to do in Prague, we always respect these three key circular economy principles: minimize waste, turn waste into resource, and regenerate local ecosystems. This is another picture from the circle scan. I'm not going to get into depth in there because Electra already talked about it, but the important thing is that thanks to that, we have a vision, we understand the key material flows within the city, and that allowed us to focus on what really matters at work, and we have the biggest impact, which is construction and real estate, the way we produce and use water, energy, and waste, and the households. But the way the cities work is that if they're really ambitious, sometimes they need to go one step further, or people here, at least, they like targets, they like measures, they like budgets. And in order to have that, we need a specific strategy, which we're currently developing, which is focusing on these 3 key sectors: food, construction, and consumer goods / waste, where we're looking at some of the key indicators that we want to achieve with these measures, like CO2 reduction and material savings. And when it comes to some specific, tangible results that are already happening, I think when we started with all this task and the circle scan uncovered that a little bit, we realized there's a huge potential in fostering the 3 R principles in the city, such as reuse, repair, and refurbish, which is really applicable to bulky waste, the way we equip our households and offices, like furniture, kitchen equipment, toys. Those things are gradually growing in numbers when it comes to waste as the city gets richer and people move away from those 3 principles, actually, and they throw more and more of that type of waste. And we want to stop that. We want to turn it around. We want to stop, we want to prevent all that type of waste going to the landfill, because unfortunately this is what has been happening, at least. So we stopped that. We said no more landfilling, at least recycling or energy recovery. But we also want to provide more innovative and smarter services for the same costs and move away from recycling to prevention. And we're talking about 50,000 tons of this type of bulky waste that's entering our waste management infrastructure. The way we want to do it is that by many different measures, local, hyperlocal, on a neighborhood level. This is one of the bigger ones. We are currently developing a reuse center, a city lab, where we found a huge inspiration in Sweden. This is a picture of a first second-hand mall in Rättuna, where people cannot buy new things. They can only buy or rent some things that have been already used by someone else. So we're working on that, but we're also discussing with other different city districts whether we could also do something of a smaller scale, like in Prague 5 or Prague 13 as we speak. So we're hoping that soon we might have actually more of these places happening. And not to mention that there are already a lot of bottom-up initiatives happening anyway, like libraries of things and so on, that we support financially and have been for a long time. Another thing that happened thanks to the scan is that we started to turn our collection yards into reuse points, or adding that aspect of reuse to the place where people usually dump their stuff and turn them into waste. Now they can drop them undamaged, and we make sure that they get a second life. Right now we're piloting it at 3 out of 19 collection yards, and the vision is to have it at all 19 collection yards in a year or two. We also support waste prevention schemes, like I mentioned, the Library of Things. We banned all the single-use plastic and non-recyclable packaging at the events that request Prague support, and also internally at the city itself. And we also support, for example, the shops which offer refillable options. We're closing the biomass flow as well. We realize there's a huge potential in, of course, preventing the food waste from happening in the first place, but also collecting that separately and turning it into precious materials such as digestate, locally applicable biofertilizer, and also bio-CNG, which can serve as an ecological alternative to CNG, which a lot of cars and buses in Prague currently use. So that's the vision, and we're currently piloting a food waste collection as the first city in the Czech Republic. We're working on developing our own biogas plant, and we already have a first car running on bio-CNG, which is cleaning Prague's sewer already, because there's also some bio-CNG to be gained from our wastewater treatment plant facility. And we're also procuring sustainable agriculture practices because Prague owns about 1,600 hectares of agricultural land. We restarted contracts on 500 hectares of that. And now the farmers have to abide by ecological principles if they want to farm there, and they do. And this is a really powerful tool, which has a lot to do with public procurement that we're currently also assessing. Today, we've had a big workshop about it, and it's going to be an important aspect of our strategy for circular economy that I mentioned at the start. Last but not least, plastics. Again, we started with banning and eliminating that flow, which is growing, and it's really of no use, because a lot of these types of packaging and products are not recyclable at all. Where we also gonna invest a lot of money into a super modern post-separation facility with robots and AI that will really collect and recycle much more of that source of material than today. There's more to be said, but we don't have time. So thanks for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Vojta, for the input. It was very useful. Also, I think the picture for our listeners, like what kind of materials are we talking about? It's about plastics. It's about the food that we waste once we don't eat that kind of lunch that we just took out. And it's all about the different aspects and materials. For example, the camera in which I'm looking to, which just the city is actually an absorber of these materials, and you just have to care of it as a representative of the city. So we're definitely go a bit more into depth right into the discussion. And from Amsterdam to Prague, we're now going to have a short journey also to Berlin, to our neighbors. So Dina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much also for having me here. Also going to start sharing my screen. So can you see my presentation? Thank you.
Yes.
I try to be short on the examples and also on the story. So my name is Dina Padalkina. I'm actually Russian who lives in Berlin, and my story with circular economy also started from my personal interest, I would say, and I think it's also kind of I think it fits to some kind of a panel discussion, which we'll have later, about social engagement and how you can start the journey with within the topic. So my my journey started back in 2017, when I think I wanted to explore the topic. At my background, I'm a macroeconomist, and I thought how actually I can change and contribute from what I know from my past to the current situation in the world. And basically, it started with the idea we need to understand what is happening right now in the city, where are these circular economy initiatives, who is doing what, and so on and so forth. And we started in 2018. I mean, I'm saying we because there was also some more volunteers helping with me together with the first mapping of a diverse landscape of stakeholders in Berlin. And I think Berlin is actually example of bottom-up flourishing environment where you can find so many things, so much inspiration, so much motivation from the diversity of people and initiatives. And when we started that, it actually became further a project which called at that time Circular Berlin. And it was born from the feasibility study, which I initiated together with a climate kick, and to see how actually circular economy can contribute to the transformation of the city. And I need to say I was inspired also by a city scan for circular economy. That's why I'm very happy always to cross over on that. That we also started with looking at social economic analysis to understand where the needs, who is doing what is actually city subjective, what is citizen subjective, and how it can be mapped through circular economy tools. And later on, we managed to bring Circular Berlin as an organization. So from the simple research projects, it became actually now active organization. It's indeed NGO. We are a non-for-profit organization, which sees our mission to accelerate Berlin transition towards circular city. And I think what's very important for us in this case, we try to work quite open source. We really think that if you want to scale and if you want to grow and if you want to improve, you need to share your knowledge. You actually need to share as much as you can to replicate your work. And that's why I hope I also could inspire with our insights what we do and how we do from Berlin to other locations. How we started, so after our analysis and also looking on where the needs and potentials within the city, we also come up with the mission, how we actually see Berlin and where the role of circular economy could be in that. So that's why within our organization, what we do, we envision Berlin as a resilient, citizen-oriented region. Resources are sourced locally if possible, used only if truly needed, and their value is maintained as part of continuous loop. Within this limit of the planet, waste and pollution are not existent. I think already from this mission, you can see that circular economy is core for us, but it's embedded in what Elektra was saying in the idea of a doughnut economy. We definitely need to define these boundaries. So it's not only about materials and flows, but we also need to set up the boundaries. And what is also very important for us was within this mission that to see the role of people and to see the role of jobs, how locally it could be enabled, because we think that circular economy, definitely first part is economy, but there definitely has to be a social element for that. And how we do as an organization, we do it through the three our impact areas. It's a knowledge building. This is where we still think that there is a lot of unknown about circular economy. And if you go to implementation, there's even more unknown about that, because sometimes to make this shift from theory to practice is actually quite a journey. And that's what we try to do with our work in the knowledge building, where we work through, I call it always three and a half sectors. It's a built environment, textile and fashion, and food. This is mainly sectorial perspective. And also work around secondary material use. This is where the repair and reuse element come in place, mainly because in Berlin there is a lot of best practices, I would call already, where you can learn a lot how it could be implemented, and definitely it has to be scaled up and learn from that. Another area of our impact is a community building, because we see ourselves as a bottom-up organization. In this way, we don't work. So we are not something who represent the city, but we are something who represent the initiatives and organizations in Berlin to make, first of all, the thing was, I think, to make them visible, because I think the first challenge which we faced back in 2018, when I had the conversations with also from the city representatives, the question was, but who are these initiatives in circular economy? Who is doing their what? So it was actually clear that there is such a great community of actors, but they are not mapped with the actually city representatives. So that's where we pick up it as our mission in this case, first to make them visible, to make them heroes of the city, to make sure that they also learn from each other, that they know who is there in different corners of the city. And I think we're still doing that, and still a lot to do about that. And last point here is education. I think for us in this case, it says that, and I think it's also my personal belief, because I think through education you can change the world. And in this case, it's still new topic. It doesn't matter whom to educate. It's school or already professionals. I think we all need to learn more about that. And this is what we also try to provide within our forces, which we can have as a non-for-profit. And to move further, I was also asked to maybe talk a bit of our projects, but I want to say it's like 1% of all projects which also happen in Berlin, because there are so many things which everybody now is striving for. But from the current one, which we do as an organization, I maybe highlight 3 of them. One of them is called Haus der Materialisierung, so German naming, which is called House of Materialization. There was also debates about this name. What is that? We try to dematerialize our economy, but here we try to materialize suddenly in this spot. And to envision this project, you can think of something as a reuse center and a warehouse of a secondary material, which is placed quite also in the center place of Berlin. It's very big participatory project, so there are many initiatives connected to that. Sometimes it's also maybe quite interesting to understand what means actually participatory process, what means to work with the diversity stakeholders. People think it's great, but it's also not an easy task. So I think it's all this work has to be done, but you have to be really patient with this. And what is interesting in this project that besides that, it also enables warehouses where secondary materials could be sourced. In our role, what we do, we try to also to enable it with a digital inventory tool, because we think that it's something which can actually scale, in the first case, the understanding of what is the secondary material flows happening there. And on the other case, it's also for us a tool to standardize how you can actually use secondary materials in the further production, if it's, and where there has to be sourced. This is also open source tool, which we're developing. So I do hope it can be used in other locations. So far we're testing it here locally for this house, but I do hope that after this project, it will be possible also to use in other locations, because I think it can drive a lot of necessary information for that. Another project which we just started, it's really a brand new project on Berlin City Textile Smart Guide. This is a project which we do together with 2 Berlin councils, synods, one of the environment protection and another of economic development. And this is an interactive online guide, or you can see it also as a platform in this case, which should help Berliners or Berlin citizens understand how they can actually deal with their clothes. Textile waste is a huge issue. Because it's one of the most polluting one, and also one of those difficult to recycle. And in our case, what we understood that Berlin is actually not a producing spot of textile, clearly, and I think you can hardly find many locations in Europe with the production. However, it's a consuming center, so there is a lot of consumption of and a lot of textile volume coming here. And what we want to enable, we want to give this transparency for consumers, how they can deal with their clothes, where they can give it away for repair, where can they give it away for the sustainable reuse purposes, how actually it could be sustained. This is what we do now, and we're just in the beginning, but very excited about that already. And maybe another project which I also want to mention, this is in the built environment or in construction, where we also focus on the topic of reuse. And mainly it's focused on how we can enable reuse of components, so not only materials, but components in the construction. Construction is also very challenging sector. Actually, whenever sector we start with, you start thinking they are quite complex. And with this mission, what we understood that reuse and construction right now, at least in Germany, is extremely experimental field. So it's you cannot find patterns how you can actually build with second-hand windows or with second-hand structural materials or any second-hand elements. And what we do, we try to document the diverse processes through diverse case studies and build a knowledge repository, at least to start referring to these practices, and maybe scale it up in other construction projects. This is where we are working on the knowledge building aspects. We also want to mention a little bit of a social component or community building component for us, which is very important. So this is our ecosystem. On the left side, you see, which actually was one of the most, it's something which gave us a lot of attention, I would say, because with this tool, we started mapping diverse initiatives in Berlin, and we have there more than 117 initiatives or projects already operating in Berlin on that. And the map is quite growing, and that's why I'm getting all the time very excited to see how many different actors we actually have in Berlin. And that's why I think it's very rich city to learn something from. And this is something which brings us always in contact with our actors. This is something where we always know how you can refer to who can actually help to the city, with which point, and so on and so forth. And another point, what I also want to say, that I think we shouldn't forget that even the circular economy is economy, but we also, all people or all individuals, and we also work with our community members, where it's not only about organization, but it's also about individuals. I think it's important that actually independently where this economic impact can be, the change starts from us, from our individuals, and that's, I think, where you can actually start with your transformation. And that's what we do with our membership, where we really try to engage with individuals and trying to empower them with this topic, and at least inspire that they can move further with conversation about that. I think from that on, I just want to share my 5 or 4 last learnings how through this journey, how we envision the work with a circular economy, circular Berlin, and what means circular city in this case. And what I would say that it's really important to work on the public-private partnerships, because this is coordination between top-down and bottom-up. This is something which actually make action. Alone, either you do it bottom-up or you alone doing top-down, it's very difficult to impose a transformation. That's why I do think there has to be cooperation between 2 elements. I also think that city transformation is a long process, and you always need to be prepared on that. So circular economy, if you come even with the strategy, will not happen like that in a year. And also because there are specific processes behind that, behind the municipalities' approaches. And I think it's just important to be prepared for that. Third thing for us was actually, whenever you do something, never do something alone, work through collaboration. And that's what we also try to strive for the projects, because it's just impossible to carry the whole topic within the power of one organization, because there's so much diversities and so much different uncovered stones in this case. So just always try to be collaborative on that. And what we also think that circular economy lately maybe shifted a little bit to the more business-driven operation. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that it should be more inclusive and actually approaching system transformation, which actually possible to do through the city change. That's it from my side, and I'm very happy for the for discussion.
Perfect. Thank you, Dina, and thanks everyone for just giving their intro into the topic. I mean, we've seen quite concrete cases, and it's more than apparent that the circular economy is just not a theory anymore, and it's getting a bit more into practice, which is a great thing to hear. But maybe just to give our listeners a bit of a step back, they've heard quite a lot of strategies, quite a lot of concrete cases, and the fact that Prague, Amsterdam, and Berlin are actually quite implementing this theory that we talk about quite a lot. But maybe just to take a step back, what has motivated you to actually work on this topic? Like, where do you feel the urge to still get up in the morning and start working on this rather than going to any other job? And maybe secondly, the that's basically, why should we care? I mean, why should we actually care about these kind of strategies and projects and everything around it? I know it's for most of us, maybe it's apparent, but let's maybe just have a short recap. Any volunteer? So maybe Dina, can you start?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's a very personal question, that's true. Well, I think for me, if I come to the point, what motivates me, I do think it's a lot to my personal belief. It grants a lot to my personal belief in this case that the short story would be like that. I was very inspired by the topic of degrowth back in 2010. And already at that time, I was thinking that actually how we do our economy is not normal. It's not the right way. And the assumptions which, as a macroeconomist, where we make assumptions growth is always there, is something wrong with that because it's not possible. Based on this ground, when you actually dive in an economy and how it works, you start to understand how much exploitation, how much unfair elements is there, how much side effects, how many externalities we face from the current economy, which we actually claim is the best what we have now. And I think in one point back in 2017, I think it was the point where you say, okay, Dina, do you want to be on a side where you actually disagree how it be, or you want to be on a side where you actually strive for a solution? Maybe it's not the right one, maybe it's not the best one, but you actually want to make an effort on that. And I think from that perspective, back on that, I think it's still grounded to my beliefs on that. And to add on top, I think what motivates me right now, so with Circular Berlin, that I see now I'm not alone, because there are so many people, so many initiatives, so many things are happening where I feel like, okay, it's definitely, I'm not alone, and definitely it makes sense and strive for that even further, because there are not so many, there are many people who also want to make this change and work hard for that. And I'm happy that I'm part of them.
That's good to hear. And I think we see this in our environment. So thanks for sharing. Electra, why should we care about circular economy? Why not just follow in the same path as we have now?
Well, I mean, it's difficult for me to answer why we should care, because I can't imagine not caring. For me, the biggest drive comes from the deep love I have for what we call our planet home and nature. And this magical place that we are part of, the system that we are so interconnected. Everything in nature is in system, is interconnected. And the beauty of understanding this intelligence and seeing that everywhere, all the man-made systems are so restricted and so limited. And the fact that they can't regenerate and everything that dies is not following, it doesn't become food for something else. So I find this so beautiful and also so creative to think in that way. And I believe that being part of this miracle, we own to work on new ways and creating more intelligent ways of being in relationship to the rest of the world. I think the only one who's going to lose is us in the end. So if we are a little bit smart, we just need to look around and actually, I like the idea I was hearing the other day, Janine Benius, who is one of the thought leaders who created the principles of biomimicry. That is about the theory that imitates the ingenious engineering of nature and applies it in different technologies and scientific fields. And she was saying that circular economy is actually economic biomimicry. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because the reason I joined the topic, and it still inspires me so much, is the fact that it's so simple. Everything in nature, when it dies, becomes life for something else. Nothing stops. Why we have created such a model that it's so limited and just gives life to things only once, and just degenerates the whole planet where we live and all the living beings? Why can't we do something better? So for me, there is no no question why somebody should care. It's like, I find it almost illogical why you shouldn't care. So that's how I usually wake up in the morning.
Perfect. It sounds like a good morning for you. I'd like to have this one as well. But definitely, I agree with you. I mean, in simplicity, there's an amusing part, and we often kind of go for complexity and for kind of going within our predestined path, and we don't really aim for changing in any way. But Vojta, what gets up you? I mean, when you go into the steering group all motivated to change things, I guess you have something inside you that kind of drives you.
Yeah, I think it's really needed in our little bubble here. To me, it's not work. It's a mission. It's a passion. I love it. It gets me more and more busy, but I'll tell you how it all started. I think it's a bit funnier, or it's a bit funny though, because I always loved nature, but I didn't know you can make a career in it. You know, I just like kind of grew up in a bit of a hippie family as well, I think. So I was interested in strange things like PR and marketing or politics when I was applying for university. And then I decided to go traveling, took a gap year, ended up at totally random university in Czech, which was focusing on sustainable development. And to be honest, I wasn't so impressed. And I was asking myself, what am I doing here? But it was not the lack of the importance of the topic, but rather the way it was described. I hate to say. Then there was one course focused on waste and renewable energy. And then for me, it was a light bulb moment. It was like suddenly the clouds open. There's this little sunshine shining at board Vojta at desk at the university, and I knew like this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. And the next day I looked up, how do I get out of this university and go to the best one out there where I can learn as much as possible? And I found out Wageningen. I moved to Netherlands, and then it just rolled on and continued. But I remember like circular economy, actually, that's where I got inspired by the concept itself. And it was by Louise Vett, who's a famous ecologist in Netherlands and a board member of circular economy, who at the first lecture to all the newcomers said, start thinking in circles. And I haven't stopped doing that ever since. And it brought me here.
Perfect. I see that our paths are kind of starting anywhere but in the Czech Republic, because I was also kind of inspired by the concept in the Netherlands when I was studying here. So it seems like all paths go in there. But thanks for sharing. Also, thanks for sharing the moment where the light shine on you, Wojtek. I think that was a good one. Anyway, we're talking quite a bit about solution to the problem. So we're talking about a lot of waste being produced within cities. I mean, it's everything that is around us. Its lifetime is quite short, and at some point it's going to end in the Czech Republic, mostly in landfill, never used. But actually, can we imagine a different economic model, basically? So can we actually, or to frame it differently, is waste a necessary byproduct of our economic system? And can we actually imagine a different world? And does it actually work in any way? Is it just too far-fetched that at some point there just won't be any waste and we're just going to circulate everything? So
I'll just briefly jump in, like, because I think it's like, I was thinking about the answer, and I think we don't have any other choice, because we're going to be 10 billion people here in 30 years. We'll have to build a city the size of Prague every 5 days from now on for the next 30 years, every day. City the size of Prague, 30 years. It's incredible. Like, and we are just like consuming more and more and more. We will, if we do it this way, we'll need 3 planets or maybe 4 to sustain our needs. And already today we're exceeding the planetary boundaries by far, especially in countries like Sweden, which is, I think, unfairly highlighted as a sustainability pioneer globally. But in fact, the way the people live here is not sustainable at all. So I think we don't have any other choice. And that's why circular economy is so attractive, because it really tackles this elephant in the room. And that's like the resources that we have on this planet are finite, and we cannot have unlimited growth on this one finite planet. And that's, for example, why I love also the donut concept as well.
Okay, I can also add to that.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, can we imagine? I think we can imagine because we had it in the past. I think we just forgot that. And there were times when we didn't have waste, and there were times when we valued what we produced and cared until really, really last whole and really, really long. And I think through the last century, and even half of the last century, somehow this knowledge just a bit forgotten. And I think this is one point. That's why I think it's easy to imagine, just look back in the history. Of course, there will be different innovation elements in this in the future, but still. But on the other hand, what I also want to say, I think with regards of waste, this is something which we as a society maybe made this mistake labeling it as a waste. Labeling is something which has no value, and building up the stigma of this even word that it's waste, we ended up with the point that we have this waste, because I do think it's, for example, within our work in Circular Berlin, we really try to avoid this word waste because it's still a resource in whatever form it is. And of course, if I will be very, very practical in this, there is some products which we have currently in our economy that by end of life of their stage, you cannot do anything with them except throwing them away. But this isn't the problem of the bad process. This is the problem of how we develop it. But it doesn't mean that the end product is not possible to fix it. That's why, an example of biomimicry, an example where you can learn from nature. This is something which I think we'll need to learn again. This will be my addition to this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think this is definitely needed to be underlined. Maybe, Elektra, just a question to you. When I imagine a city and just stepping into the city, into a square, I see just so many things around me. I just took a train there or a tram or something. I'm having my phone in my pocket, and then I'm just going to have a drink and I'm just going to waste it somewhere. If you're a city official and you take the city, where do you start? Like, what kind of materials should you focus on? Because it's just so plentiful, and it must be very complex to actually wrap your head around it. So how would you start? And maybe do you have some preference?
Yeah, well, I think I would take one step back and create a very thorough vision. Because before what we are missing mostly here nowadays, we are very good in understanding parts of problems and fragmenting and resolving and being specialized. But what we are mostly lacking, and that we need in order to create really truthfully innovative solutions, is this systems thinking and the big view. And if I was given now a city and I would say, they would tell me, just do whatever you want, where to start. I wouldn't start with technical solutions. I wouldn't go just directly and do food and pick one. I would just create a big vision, a vision that is holistic and makes everyone to relate, a narrative that creates a totally new set of values. I would create a totally different goal, which would be prosperity for all, caring for the planet, and not just looking at indicators of growth. So the first thing I would do is set the boundary, set the tone in totally different context. So I would create a totally different vision, which I would also crowdsource as much as possible information from the people about what they want to see in the city. And I would set just the picture in a different frame. And starting with this big vision is very important, because all of us, anyhow, we're human. And I think the technologies and the solutions are there. We just need to reconnect to the values that they can create the change. So it's this kind of values and narrative that I would like to start with. that I find it very important to create a compass and orientation. And then, of course, the cities are big and they are systems with multiple ends and resources. But I would like everyone who works in all these different technology solutions, other mobility, housing, name it, health, education. I would like all of them to connect through back to this vision. So once we have this collective view and we all understand we're going there, I think that would be my first thing to do if I were to start.
Yeah, I think that were very nice words, and definitely underline that without vision, all our actions are just in vain, and we're just kind of floating in the river, not knowing where to go and not knowing where we're actually leading. Also, maybe Vojta, to you, I mean, in practice, like how do you approach this, priorities kind of issue? Like, so many things to start with, so many things to tackle. How should we look into cities? Like, where do you start?
Yeah, it's a great question. And first of all, what I would do is that I would copy paste Electra's solution. I would put my feet on a table and I would open a beer and wait for a few weeks. And then, it's really hard to get outside of that operational hell that actually running a city is, right? It's not a company, it's not a state, it's such a weird organism that it's lovely but extremely chaotic. So it's actually pretty hard to achieve something, but it's also really interesting. Like, look at Prague. I mean, on a daily basis, 1/5 of the population of the whole country moves through the city. We produce 25% of the GDP. So we are at an extremely interesting spot to actually change things. But we need to be systematic and holistic about it, which is extremely difficult. There are solutions that are ambitious and have this perspective in mind, but then there's the daily reality of politics, voters, media. It's unbelievable, like how trivial and great solutions end up wasted because of just negative energies. But putting this aside, I think it's important and that's what we're trying to do. We need we have that vision for circular economy. We need a strategy. We need to know where can we have the biggest impact, and we need to invest our time smartly. So we do not waste our time on plastic straws, but we focus on the big things, like how do we actually build and feed the city? I think those are the two huge questions that circular economy can really, really tackle. And I would add that education is something that had a huge impact on myself, and I bet on everyone else around here. And I think we can really foster ingraining that aspects into how we engage with primary, elementary, high schools and universities, because that's investment into the long-term resilience of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched upon an important issue, which is like barriers that are tackling us and that are hindering us towards like implementing these solutions that we have ahead of us, be it technological or different ones. I mean, it's just on our tables. We know it's there. There's the challenge ahead of us, but yet it's not happening in some ways. So maybe if you would have like a magic wand, like you could spell some magic and something out of nowhere would happen. Like what it would be like, what would actually just make your work much easier, in which you would just, I don't know, step into your work and something like just would pop out. Like if there would be one thing that you could change, one barrier that you could tackle, what it would be? Would it be education, as you mentioned, or would it be more like a technological solution?
From the perspective of what we're trying to do in Prague, right now it's a lot about people, I would say. So if I'd had a magical wand, I would hire a group of experts and set up circular economy department, directly advising the mayor, a huge budget. And I would also, I wish, everyone involved in the city and living in the city would see the things that we do. I don't know if they would like it, but if I had that band, I would do it, because then obviously it would be much easier.
So the solution is in people, not in technology. Yeah.
I mean, you know, from the challenges that I'm dealing with right now, yeah.
Would you say the same, Electra?
Yeah, I do think that the technologies are there. I mean, what we call people is different because there are different perspectives. When you see city officials, they call people the citizens. When you talk to the citizens, then they believe that the answer is on the politicians, that they can create regulations. So yeah, if all this is called people, I do think that the answer is on us. Yeah, I'm not one of those that believe that technology can save us and can create new planets and all this. I do think that it's on us to create a new paradigm and try to find, as I said, a new connection, go back to, go where we belong, into a much more regenerative relationship with nature. And yeah, I think that's a shift that we can do. And the good thing is that it's not something we have to invent right now, because there are a lot of examples of civilizations and indigenous and other types of communities that they have lived in harmony with their environment and in nature. So this knowledge is in us, and so we can create it again and bring it forth.
Yeah, I agree. Dina, what about Berlin? All people are just in line with circular economy there, right?
I think people are everywhere, people. It doesn't matter where. And yeah, I think we need a kind of a common enlightenment. I don't know, there's like this, everyone, there will be magic rain, and after this rain, everybody who had this drop of the rain got enlightenment, and that, wow, that's actually how it should be. Because I also think the biggest challenge is actually to bring this understanding, and also to make people awaken, so that they actually start understanding that there is special responsibilities in the action, that they have also commitment to specific elements. That's why I think, yes, I would still be on the side of education, and sometimes it takes time, sometimes it takes also patience, but I think it's important to keep on explaining and talking and being always motivated about that. But I also think I'm this part of the person who doesn't believe that technology will solve everything, because I think the change starts from the head. And even we have a technology, I mean, like for me, the biggest example is the chemical industry. I think it's a great industry, but there is a lot of outcomes which we have from the chemical industry, which actually harm our right now, like ourselves, our lives. And this is where I think we can see, okay, technological improvement or whatever, like what actually developed in the labs sometimes is not something which solve our problem, but it create more if we don't think it through. And that's where I think you can never predict what technology can bring to us, but you actually can predict if you think through and you can understand your action.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just build on that, Dina, and then also what Electra mentioned. I think like that, you know, imagine like if the whole world continued to pursue the values that we here in the West do. Everyone. No technology is going to save us if everyone wants to have 2 cars, 2 houses, fly to Bali for summer vacay or winter vacay, and 30 pairs of shoes. I mean, but this is what we are actually doing here in Sweden, even more than in the rest of the world. And the huge question is, what's going to happen with all the growth countries in the global south? What will they choose? Because if they pursue the values that we do, then I don't think there's a technology that will get us out of this mess.
Yeah, but sorry, Dina, go on.
I think this is always the most complicated debates. How you can balance out the one who are rich with their values and the one who are not rich, but they actually want to experience the whole this path which the rich had. I mean, also like a person also as a Russian social life, but I would say our social value is also still on this path of the status, reaching the status rather than thinking about the climate elements. And I think it's still important okay, even this the Western economy will communicate and explain and bring the best from them to the South economy or the developing nations. I think you cannot decide for them because everyone would decide for themselves. But that's where I think it's so important to explain. It's important to talk about that. So important to make these transitions and explanation. And of course, I would say that the Western countries, which are the most consuming countries, they need to rethink how they do it because the way it's happening now, it's not good.
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox, right? That those that maybe have these values but still have the urge to exploit some of the opportunities they have at hand, they do so. Anyway, maybe let's close this discussion about materials where we've went quite a lot into also social dimension, values, etc. I'd like to touch upon one issue, and that's climate change, of course, the two words that we hear quite a lot. I mean, is there a way that the way we produce our goods, our materials, our phones, our notebooks, our laptops, is there a way in which circular economy can actually help us in mitigating climate change, in mitigating the crisis? And if so, how? Maybe Electra, would you like to touch upon this?
Yep, thanks. Yeah, I find this very interesting because when we talk about climate change, we mostly think about the emissions associated to energy consumption, and there is a strong narrative that has to do with reducing energy and consumption, and less, and people have less connected it with the materials. Nevertheless, once we enter in a circular economy, where we manage to reduce the consumption of products that we need because we will be able to reuse them or to refurbish them or to give them multiple lives. So the demand for new products and therefore resources and activities would be constantly less and less and reducing. All the associated emissions and impacts from logistics, from manufacturing will drop tremendously. Therefore, there is a very big connection between the circular economy and the impact we will have on climate change. There is it's not immediate that we see when we just switch off the light, because that means that the power plant is going to stop producing energy at that point. But it's more this embodied emissions and all the emissions that have to do with consumption of resources and production of products. So the more we enter in a space where products, where we first reduce our consumption and we need less products, and then we manage to circulate them, our energy demand and therefore all the emissions related to that will also drop. So there is a big impact that we can do also through the circular economy strategies on the fight against climate change.
Yeah, I see thumbs up from Wojciech, so I guess he agrees. But Wojciech, maybe since you're giving your thumb up, what kind of materials are relevant, maybe, or if you just like to follow up?
Yeah, I would like to. I totally agree, and I would just add that I think what I love about circular economy, although I think we need to work on tackling the consumerism debate, I don't think we're really doing it in the circular economy world. But anyway, we not only can save a lot of emissions by keeping products longer in use and making sure that the resources in them are also looped perpetually. But we can also move from owning things to using things, which offers a lot of different benefits, and not just environmentally, but also economically. Cars are a great example. So a standard car in the EU is parked 93% of the time that it is owned. That's ridiculous, right? So imagine like we would be using them to its full potential by sharing them. I think it's coming there. Good example from Sweden, which is really surprising, is washing machines. Not the dishwashers, but the washing machines. It's still quite common here in Gothenburg that you have a complex and they have a basement where they have 4 super high-tech washing machines and 2 dryers, which means 200 apartments don't have their own washing machine and a dryer. And it's still super common, and I love it. And then you also, it's better for the clothes. You can book your time. It works just fine. The problem in Prague is that all the basements were turned into hipster coffee bars. So there's not so much space for that anymore. But it's just an example of, using things instead of owning things. You can really consume better and less like that.
Yeah, but we like those hipster coffee bars, right? And those bad kind of pubs and beers that we can have here. So I'm glad. Yeah. Anyway, Dina, would you maybe, does Berlin think about circular economy as some sort of, way to mitigate climate change? Or is it totally out of radar and we're just focusing on renewable energy and that's it?
Well, I think, good question, actually. I think Berlin and Germany itself started with the topic of circular economy from recycling economy, because Germany also sees itself as a still front runner when you start to there's German term Kreislaufwirtschaft, which means circular economy, and it's actually embedded in the regulation as a term circular economy. So there is Circular Economy Act, which was back in the 90s developed, but is closely recycling approach. So this is something which is only managed waste management, which is until recent time was quite a big confusion, I guess, what means circular economy or the potentials of circular economy. Because when you come to the city or even to some politicians and start talking about circular economy, they said, yeah, but we have it already since 90s. So what do you want from us? And that's why I think the term was quite confusing. And until now, so I think what's also very interesting, like Berlin, at least back in last year, they issued their waste management concept based on the term circular economy, and actually proclaimed that we want to be zero waste city. And I think it's also quite interesting that in this debate, when you start talking about circular economy, start talking about medication, you have this also another term, which is called zero waste. So if you come to Berlin, there will actually be more discussion about waste and understanding of zero waste rather than about circular economy. And I think just recently with the Green New Deal, and where this became like really pushing agenda from the EU, that you need to reconsider this. There is term circular economy 2.0, so to say, evolved here. And I think still there is a lack of debate on how circular economy can contribute to the climate mitigation issues. I think it's still more on this material side elements and more like on the rationale that we overconsume. This is basically the key point where Berlin strives for, but how this actually connected with the goals, how you can reduce climate pressure or how you can reduce CO2 emissions is something which I think still a bit underexplored in Berlin. But I think the understanding of part of circular economy and embodied energy and emission contribute, that it's actually part of common understanding, but no clarity how exactly the contribution can be done. That's what I think is where Berlin right now is.
Yeah, I think it's kind of surprising for me, that we kind of view our economy in terms of pipes and chimneys, and we just see the emissions flowing out of those pipes and chimneys, but we don't really view that these kind of energies are hidden in the materials that we use, and we don't associate it with that, even though, of course, within construction or within heavy industry, it's just massive use of energy into products that if we could reuse them or not use them at all, maybe just to prevent their use, we could just save a lot of energy and a lot of emissions, which are just pouring out into the sphere. And actually, I view, climate change is just a waste problem. It's just a waste that is just kind of absorbed in our atmosphere for 500 years, and we don't know anything about it, and we don't know how to solve it.
Yeah, I think this is very, very important to see, because indeed we don't associate products with energy. I think because it's already too complex to think about like that for most of the people. But nevertheless, I mean, even that I don't like to connect recycling economy with a circular economy, I think when people see, okay, there is a waste everywhere, there is something wrong with all that, why it's becoming more and more. And from still tackling from that perspective, I think if you do it right, it can open the eyes for, at least for the action element. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's more than clear that also within circular economy, we can just help aside of changing our energy structure in terms of mitigating climate change within cities where everything is concentrated and where also the solution lies in front of us. Anyway, a bit more into the softer side of our self and inner selves, I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into our behaviors. So the way we behave on our everyday basis, and how can we actually become part of circular economy in our day-to-day practices. I actually just read this study from the International Energy Agency, and they said that, let me just read it, around 55% of the cumulative emissions reductions are linked to consumer behavioral changes. And they also say, and kind of these softer issues, this does relate to circular economy as well, that, for example, in order to meet some of our climate targets into 2050, the 1.5 degree target, for example, we'll have to introduce speed limits like 100 kilometers per hour, like in most of our motorways. We'll have to rapidly increase plastics collection and the collection rate of our plastics. Our regional flights have to be shifted, or they have to be shortened. And all these other, or for example, space heating temperatures should be moderated to like 20 degrees in our rooms. So these are quite, for many people, rapid changes. And Vojta, you've also mentioned in Sweden, there's quite a high, rate of the way we're kind of used to our day-to-day living. So maybe, what do you think about this? Is this possible that our behavior will change? And again, I guess you'll say it has to. But if it won't, maybe should we force it, or should we just educate? What do you think that we should do about this?
All right, I'll just jump in quickly. I think that a lot of these debates are structured about putting the blame on us as consumers. And then people do these weird things, like when it comes to, they put a lot of effort and focus into things that make a tiny difference, and they count. But I think that, and it should totally happen. And there's so many things we can do. But I think the best and the biggest impact that we all can have is to just get engaged, look around your community, your work, your family, and I was talking to a guy at a different debate on Clubhouse who was the director of Liftago in Prague, a big car sharing company or taxi company, and he was asking, okay, what can I do to live more sustainable life? And I said, if you manage that your cars will be electric in a few years, you can have much bigger impact in 1 year than you would have had in your whole lifetime if you were producing a little bit less waste and went for reuse or repair. So of course all that counts, but I'm just trying to make a point that we can really change the way we work, what we do, who we get hired by, and what do we do over the weekends and so on. I think this is it offers such a vast amount of creative opportunities and we're missing out on that in a way when we put that blame on us. You should have bought that eco avocado from Peru because it's better than non-eco avocado from Peru, right? Sometimes we as consumers have only bad or worse choices, and we need to sustain our needs in one way or another. But of course, there are so many ways we can do to make that small difference anyway in our daily habits. But I will leave that maybe for the ladies as well to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to touch upon it a little bit. I was reading again a study that says that 86% of Czech inhabitants think the impact of climate change is of course real, but only 39 of them think that it will happen, that it will somehow impact their families directly. So I think they kind of see, waste and circular economy as an issue, but they can't really imagine the impact on their day-to-day practices. So I think that's an interesting insight. But maybe, Electra, how do you think that, we could become part of circular economy? Should we just observe these strategies or read about them, or how can we become part tomorrow?
I think that everyone has a potential to create change in their own space, in their own realm of influence. So there is you just need to start. I don't want to create negative language and blame culture. Of course, there are so many different things that every one of us can do. You can start from your daily life and change a small thing. Obviously, behaviors can be influenced by policies and big decisions as well. If you're a city, you can make bold decisions and target advertising. And as I said, create new narratives if we really want to see massive behavior change. But until this happens, I think that each one of us can do something. You just need to be there and commit to this and find ways to change small practices, just from not buying single use coffee glasses, or even that. I know it's not going to change the world, but I do believe that all these small actions, all accumulated, create a momentum. And once you start and you start building in this direction, and you start building an awareness and an ethos towards this direction, then I think it's just a river that takes you. And yeah, that would be my suggestion. There are so many different ways to contribute towards this change, by doing small examples, by joining community initiatives, by joining coalitions. There is so much out there that you can be part of, and I do believe that the new generations also that are now out there are much more mainstreaming those concepts that being so difficult to imagine. I think the change is happening fast, and what we even in our age consider so forward-thinking, the children of 15 years old right now has become part of their mainstream. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the idea that behaviors don't change and people don't change. I think people change a lot, and there are many ways to do that. Yeah, that's me being more of an optimist.
No, I think it was great. Thanks for sharing. I think it's really important to highlight these day-to-day practices and the fact that we have to be involved in the change and not just wait for anyone else to solve our troubles in time. Let me maybe just briefly touch upon one last thing, and then we'll get into some of our questions. We've introduced also the donut economy. So far, we've been talking about materials, emissions, products, all dead things, like things that don't live the way we do. But how do we incorporate this concept? And this is something that circular economy has been often criticized. Like, you talk a lot about waste, a lot about materials, emissions, but you don't talk about people at all in the city. How do we maybe combine these concepts? You know, like, how does the donut economy maybe work more with the social dimension in cities? And I would direct this either to Electra, because I know you're quite familiar with this.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's true that until now, circular economy has been mostly associated with the resources and closing the loop of resources. It was much more of a technocratic concept. But what I love a lot about the donut and the holistic view that it brings of combining the social and environmental dimension is that it brings the idea of economy back to where the root of it is. Most of us understand also nowadays economy, or the ones that we are not economists, because I'm an engineer, we understand economies as like the financing mechanism, like the financing aspects, all about the money. But economy is a Greek word, which means actually to manage the household. Means that how do we manage our resources and how do we manage our activities and how we collectively work together, like in a household, to keep the house in balance. So if we think of economy in that way, there is no way you can't forget about the social aspects. So I find this merging of the circular economy with the donut economy very interesting, because the donut model is a very holistic model that combines the social foundation and speaks about the needs of all and how to create distribution of resources and make sure that everyone has what they need, not to create those extreme edges of 1% of the world owning 50% of resources. So I like to see circular economy as a means to this bigger vision of that the donut offers, as a means towards creating a thriving world where everyone can have enough while we respect the boundaries of our planet. So yes, for me, this is the most interesting aspect that has to do with the more soft and shadow aspects of circular economy. What are like the governance models that we need to implement to create circular systems? What are the values and the narratives that we need to have in place to truly create circular and fair economies? And yes, what are these behaviors that we need to embed in such a system where resources flow and they are accessible by many? So that's the most interesting question personally, and that's why I also work with the donut.
Yeah, I guess it's the frontier of circular economy to also include these kind of aspects which are still yet hidden. And I think it's maybe also understandable, for example, in the Czech Republic, and Vojta knows this very well, we still landfill half of our waste, yet we also want to include these aspects in our day-to-day practices. But I definitely believe that it's absolutely essential in everything we do. Anyway, we have also questions here from our audience, and I'm also getting a bit. We have 20 minutes maybe for the discussion, and I'll have maybe one question for each and one of you from our listeners. And the first question is concerned with like the national differences, and it goes into how well is the concept of circular economy established in your national law, if in any case. And maybe I'll give the word to Dina, because I see that she's smiling about it.
I'm smiling a lot. I think it's so interesting. I think in general, I'm so happy to be here because it's so many interesting conversations. National law. So I will not talk about Russian national law. I will talk about German national law in this case. And as I mentioned, in German national law, the economy is embedded, but as a Circular Economy Act, which actually coming from the European Waste Management Directive. So a lot of
regulation which is embedded in the German regulation coming from the European Union directives. In some cases, Germany was even before European Union come up with such directives. But as I mentioned, I don't think you can express through the framework of regulation what circular economy actually means right now, because it limits either to one sector. For example, I will tell us like the one thing is a Circular Economy Act, which is connected to waste management. Another, for example, there is a packaging act, which is managing packaging or circulation on a German market, and you cannot look on that only through the one sector. You have to look on it holistically, and this is, I think, what is not embedded in the German national regulation. And this is where the problem starts, because from the frameworks there is no holistic, from legal frameworks there is no holistic view on the circular economy. Another level which makes extra complexity, there is also city level, which has its own regulatory frameworks. And sometimes you cannot do so much as you wish on the city level because you are limited maybe by the national regulation. And in case of Berlin, you have also districts which are very, very independent in this case and can also impact in terms of measures what they can impose. That's why I think circular economy, you can find that some pillars or some reflections in the regulation of that, but it's way beyond that. And this is what makes it difficult to reflect in legal framework.
Yeah, and I think the trouble with circular economy is that it has quite a lot of definitions and quite a lot of people view it a bit differently. And too often it just kind of narrows into waste and there it ends. So really binding it into law, I think it's there. For example, in the Czech Republic, I know there's something a bit more about procurement, about circular procurement, that we should include some of aspects when we buy things as part of ministries. But I think it's going to be more dispersed in different parts of laws. Another question from our audience, I direct this one to Wojciech, if you don't mind, is, and I guess you'll say yes, but it says, do you fight with any negative opinions, such as politicians, businesses, or people in your work with circular economy? And if so, what kind of critique is there?
Actually, the answer is not really. In Prague, luckily, others took the hit. When we're talking about a toll system for cars, there's so this whole climate plan that circular economy is part of, there's much more controversial topics there that raise a lot of attention. So I've been lucky to stay out of that. That can change, obviously. I'm also not the first one in line. I'm not a politician. So, but okay, of course. So the thing in Czech is that everyone has an opinion on everything, and especially about waste. So there will be people always trying to express their freedom of choice and opinion in terms of I want that new car. I want that new thing from IKEA. I will throw that into that black bin. I'm not separating waste. And they're usually the loudest, but you just have to stay out of that noise, because I think the silent majority of the people are actually in favor of what we're proposing, but I might be totally wrong. I hope not. And this is something we really need to work on. This public debate, we've been really bad at it, I have to say. So I don't really have feedback on what we're trying to achieve, with these circular economy interventions. One more example is, I told you about closing this biomass flow, right? But in order to have that, we need a biogas station in Prague, ideally. And that, of course, a lot of people from 3/4 of the Prague think it's a great idea, but the people living next to it don't think so, really. They don't want that next to their house, but they will, who knows how that will end up. So that's something we're really concerned about. When you make these big facilities that can stink, although this one won't, people still have it connected, but it could explode or something. Yeah. Obviously it's not going to happen, but so small cases, but I would say people are really in favor of what we're doing.
It's kind of it's called NIMBY, right? Not in my background. kind of fact and approach. Like, I want this technology to happen, and I want this solution to happen, but I don't want to have it close to my house because it would make some kind of troubles. Maybe last question to you, Electra, and I probably know the answer, but how well is the concept of circular economy established in your country? And I guess you could choose either Greece or Holland, where you're probably working. So yeah.
I will speak for Holland because this is where I've been based and I have been working, and I've learned also as you the concept of circular economy. As you know, the Netherlands is a pioneer in that field. They kind of almost initiated this practices, and we have seen a lot of work happening already there for the last 10 years. Amsterdam, the city of Amsterdam, worked with circular economy early on in time, about in 2015, where we created their first circular city scan. And from there, after like hundreds and hundreds of pilot projects and collaborations in the space of circular economy exist, it's a little paradise for those interested in circularity, because you can find a lot of practical examples of how this can be taking place in practice, how businesses can win of it, what forms of collaborations and industrial symbiosis you can create. It's really forward in terms of circular economy, and the city wants to be fully circular by 2050. That's a super ambitious goal. So it's a place to look at when you want to see circular economy in practice.
Yeah, I think it's not coincidence that a lot of us, be it me or Wojciech or you, Electra, are not Dutch, but are in some sense kind of connected to the Netherlands as a frontrunner in the topic. All right, maybe really final, maybe a hopeful one to start on a better note and to have a good night so we can sleep very well. I have a last question that maybe just try to summarize it in 2 or 4 sentences. Maybe how do you envision cities in the future, be them circular, climate neutral, and how can I as an individual become part or become, how can I as an individual make that future happen, basically? What can I do to make that future happen? Wojciech.
Wow. I mean, I think I envision cities as something amazing, something huge, something a little bit intimidating. It's the cities are the linear culprit, right? It's like they only take 1% of the land, but they consume, 70% of the resources, produce 70% of the emissions, roughly speaking. So this is not going to change. It's going to accelerate. More people will live in cities than today, and we need to build a lot of cities, like I mentioned. And if we do it the way that we've been doing it for the last couple of decades, then we are doomed. So I think if we are really successful with this change, which is happening, cities can be something really, the real showcase of like everything connected to circular economy, not just like, and sustainability and maybe fairness as well, something not just about one product. It's where everything happens, where people live, sleep, work, move, and everything will hopefully come together in this chaotic system, which will help us to get over this crisis we're at. I think actually cities, even though they are guilty of being super linear, I think it's also here where solutions and the creativity and the innovation and the talent happens. So I think we also have solutions that are created, and I think we'll have to get there.
Thank you. Who would like to follow up? So I'm gonna choose Dina.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to what Wojciech said. I think there's also there has to be, if I would envision the city, and sometimes it's difficult to see what would be the roadmap to this vision. But I do think that cities should move away from this center of consumption and exploiting what is outside of the city. And in this case, I would just say that I would envision the cities of the future which are more inclusive, but also on the social component, but also more decentralized and autark. Because I do think we need to, if we want to, as Wojtek said, we shouldn't be doomed. And I think there has to be more local processes happening within the city, more loops happening within the city. And then I think it's possible also to change the concept of this consumer-based city where everything happening and it depends on different resources from outside of the city. So I would bring this vision. I think it's possible. Maybe we don't know the defined path for that, but I think it's worth trying.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Elektra.
Yes, like also relating to what the other said, I can imagine the cities of the future combining this local global elements. How can they become hubs where resources are recycled and circulated locally, so they have strong economies as far as the hard, heavy materials are concerned, but at the same time they're completely open globally into exchanging what we call the light things, which is information, knowledge, patents, and all the things that are needed in order to create a fully circular system. So I can imagine cities operating in that way. And what people can do to become part of such a vision, well, just believe in that change and do your little thing every day. Influence your peers, keep being inspired, create and share knowledge and inspiration, talk to your family, be with your friends, and keep on influencing on your own realm and start today. I think that would be the way. There is no other magical recipe. It's just to do it.
Nice. I couldn't write it even this way if I would just be sitting for 30 minutes to say these words. So thanks for them. I think it's a beautiful ending to our discussion, which is getting to an end after basically more than an hour and a half, close to 2 hours. So I would really like to thank deeply from my heart to our panelists, to Elektra, Wojtek, and Dina, for taking their time to share their story with us, to share their practice with us, be it in Amsterdam or in Prague, in Berlin. I mean, obviously, we see that we have these change makers within cities, these individuals which are shaping the way we produce goods, the way we really feel our everyday practices. So I would really like to thank not only you for being part of this discussion, but also for your day-to-day work and for making circular economy not a theory, but a practice, which is something that we've, I hope, illustrated. So I also thank very much to the organizers and to our partners that really made this event happen, and also to our listeners, for which I hope this event was at least to the end hopeful. So thanks everyone, and take care, and let's make our cities circular. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Pavel.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice evening. Thanks a lot.